This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include political consultant Brad Crone, John Hood from the John Locke Foundation, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, and Becki Gray from the John Locke Foundation. Well, welcome to this last NC Spin show of 2014. As is our tradition, we're going to ask our panel to reflect back on the events of the year and give us their final comments on their significance. We'll also name the NC Spin Person of the Year. So let's get started. In reflecting back on the year, we had the coal ash spill in February, the primary elections in May, the short session of the General Assembly with lots of contention, and the nasty and expensive general elections in November. So let's start with the coal ash spill. John, on February 2nd, a Duke Energy coal-fired power plant leaked 80,000 tons of coal ash into the Dan River. At year's end, not much has happened to the cleanup. What was the impact of this event, and what changes did it bring about?
Well, it illustrated that there needed to be action on the stored coal ash, which the state has now taken the preliminary steps to get that going. They have to study, then they have to act. They're going to bury some of it in more secure location. They're going to reuse some of it for construction. They should have acted on this years ago. But the reason why the issue did not actually balloon and grow into some gigantic scandal or political matter is because we're not talking about toxic chemicals dumped into the water that had clear environmental harm. We're talking about what amounts to trace elements that are of concern, but there weren't any fish kills. There wasn't anything that could make the story bigger than it was. It was a significant story, but it was not a colossal one.
Brad, as a follow-up to all of that, the governor didn't sign this bill into law. He allowed it to become law, but he didn't sign it into law, and the reason for it was that he felt like the legislature was usurping his authority by taking away most of the appointive powers for this coal ash commission. He later sued them.
Right.
How significant is that? How significant was this story?
Well, I think that it's a very significant story. I think it's significant that he had to turn to Governor Martin and to Governor Hunt to help elevate the story to proceed on showing the input and impact to the executive authority. Another element of the story is who's going to end up paying. Are the ratepayers going to pay for it, or the shareholders going to pay for it?
And that's a 2015 story.
That's a 2015 story, no doubt, but the authority that they gave to the Utilities Commission is unbridled.
Becki, a lot of people are saying that they're trying to point fingers as to whose fault it was and so forth like that, that they're saying Diener hadn't done its job, that the regulators over at Diener were protecting Duke and other utilities instead of overseeing them.
Well, of course, this is a problem that began many years ago. I mean, the breach in the Dan River, that accident that occurred was a result of long-term coal ash storage. The other thing, too, this story is not over. I mean, as Brad mentioned, we don't know who's going to pay for it, how much of it is going to be cleaned up, how much of it could be reused or recycled into things we may not even know about today. And then also the EPA is getting involved in what this is going to look like. North Carolina has passed the first in the country and the strongest coal ash regulations.
All right, another big story was the short session that wasn't very short. 1 week after the May primary, the elections, the legislature came back to Raleigh for this short session. It was contentious, didn't adjourn until August 1st. Chris, the lawmakers missed the July 1st start of the fiscal budget year, which is not so unusual. As the months have ensued, however, we found that state revenues are lagging behind last year's projections. Give us your assessment of the impact this budget has had in 2014.
Well, I think we're still figuring that out. I think we talked about on the show many times, I'm very concerned that we're $190 million below projections. The question is, where will we be after the April tax returns? I think that shortfall could grow. I suppose it could get less. I think they're going to have some tough budget decisions to make this year. They did cut a lot of things to pay for a tax cut. The tax package cost, I think, roughly $700 million this year. Whether you support it or not, that meant they couldn't spend that money and invest in other things. And we've seen a lot of stories come out, even in Phil Berger's own district recently, about the schools being severely underfunded.
I want to get to some other issues that took place during this short session. Obviously, DHHS, Medicaid reform, all of that was front and center. held up the budget, held up a lot of contentious debates going between the governor and the Senate and the House. How significant was it, John?
It was a big deal. I mean, Medicaid is a political matter. It's a fight between the Democrats and the Republicans. It is portrayed as a fight between Washington and the states, or between President Obama and his Republican critics. But in North Carolina, it's very important for people to understand this is largely a fight among interest groups, hospitals and physician practices and others who would get the money, versus other groups who are concerned about the cost and how it would affect the programs that they want to get. So this is a fight about money. It is heavily lobbied by people, by large interests, large, expensive campaigns, not a whole lot about individuals.
All right, another big issue that this legislature faced was teacher pay. And there was a lot of discussion back and forth, 2%, 7%, 11%. At the end of the day, Brad, how does all this work? How does it rest with the teachers and the education community and with the citizens?
I promise you this, the Medical Society has a better shrimp cocktail than the school teachers do down at Cooper Middle School in Clayton. So when you compare who's fighting over what, was John saying there are mighty large interests fighting over it. I think you're going to have another big push to come back in. The question over the teacher pay raise, Tom, was who got the raise, and the most frequent, the recent hires, those who have the youngest professional tenure in the system got the biggest raises, just to try and elevate up that starting salary for our teachers. So I think there's going to be a whole lot of debate as we move forward on your more tenured teachers.
The governor came forward in 2014 with his 25-year transportation plan, which he had been promising us since he took office. What kind of impact did that have?
Well, I think it's going to have a very large impact. What we're doing now, thanks to Governor McCrory's plan, is a different way of looking at how we pay for roads and bridges, maintenance and building new roads. So it's a different way of looking at it, rather looking at congestion, where the need is, where economic development possibilities are, rather than political patronage.
All right. Well, you can have additional video content from our website, ncspin.com. Anytime you go on our website, you can read and see our editorials and perspectives on ncspin.com or ncspin on Facebook, and we're tweeting at ncspin tweets. Balanced debate for the Old North State, and when we come back, we're going to talk about more of the top stories of 2014.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
My name is Bernie Teal. Sunburst Farms has been in my family for over 35 years. Last year I had to do something I'd never done before. Destroy 10 acres of good squash. I wasn't able to find enough workers. The opportunity is there. American families are demanding locally grown vegetables, and I want to provide that to them. So please tell Congress that we need immigration reform now.
I think family physicians are very conscious of cost. They want to order the right test at the right time for the right patient. If you have someone else who is interjected in that decision-making, who has profit as their bottom line motive, I think it changes the whole conversation. You lose trust. I think the trust is with the family physician who has the patient's best interest at heart. If the person making those recommendations and decisions about testing and procedures and going to see a particular specialist, if that is being made with profit in mind, there's no way a patient can have trust in that.
North Carolina's family physicians support Medicaid reform that keeps healthcare decisions right where they belong, between the patient and their trusted family physician. OurNCHealthcare.com.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, come on, we're leaving.
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
You know, we don't have this, like, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me, and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
One in 5 North Carolinians can't buy healthy foods in their communities, increasing their risk of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and some forms of cancer. Learn more at accesshealthyfoodsnc.org.
We now return to NC Spin.
We continue with our review of the top stories of 2014. For off or midterm elections, we saw more TV commercials and big-name politicians in our state than we typically see in presidential years. Polls showed the voters were turned off and eventually tuned out all the negative advertising, even as they turned out in the same percentage as is typically the case for these midterm events. Brad, the big race, of course, was the U.S. Senate race. We said all through the year it was going to be close, and indeed it was. Speaker Tillis eked out a win over Kay Hagan, as we know. You've had a chance to reflect on this. Tell us the significance of this race.
I think the significance is the power of the unaffiliated voter in the state and the power of the white vote in the state. I think both the party bases performed at levels that everybody was expecting. The unaffiliated voter broke over between 58% in your urban areas to 63% Republican in your suburban and rural regions of the state. And Tom, when you look at eastern North Carolina and western North Carolina, there was even a larger divide of unaffiliated voters supporting Tom Tillis and voting Republicans. The Democrats will not be able to govern in the state until they get a message that unaffiliated voters will be able to support, and they capture a 50-50 split with that vote base.
All right, so we had the Congress shift from 9-4, Republican to Democrat, to 10-3. The Supreme Court remained in control of Republicans. The Court of Appeals became under the control of majority of Republicans. The legislature still being controlled by veto-proof majorities in both houses. So the question is, after the elections of 2014, are we a red state? Are we a blue state? Are we a purple state, Becki? Or what color are we?
All the demographics show that we are very much a purple state. And a lot of people are already starting to look at the day after the election. Of course, the 2016 election began. I've seen reports that already Governor McCrory's governorship will be one of the most closest races in the country, and a lot of speculation of where North Carolina will go as far as a presidential race. I think that we are still very much a purple state.
John, there was a lot of discussion prior to the elections about voter suppression and the new voter laws that the legislature passed in 2013 and the impact they were going to have. What impact did they have?
Well, turnout in the 2014 election in North Carolina was the second highest midterm turnout in modern North Carolina history. Now, let's be fair about this. If you passed a series of election reforms and turnout had been low in North Carolina, lower than average or lower than the rest of the country or something like that, that would have been seen as proof that the election laws had suppressed the vote. Now we know that instead North Carolina had one of the highest turnouts in the country, one of the highest turnouts of midterm elections in recent North Carolina history, and the folks who are claiming voter suppression say, yes, there was voter suppression, because apparently you cannot disprove their claim. It doesn't matter what information you have, what evidence you have, it is an unfalsifiable premise, which means that they are not making a serious argument.
All right, so Chris,
I just want to say one thing. There were a lot of people that didn't vote, that wanted to vote because of mass confusion over the election law. We didn't fund the election precincts. We had people in line for 3 hours because we didn't have straight ticket voting anymore. It took longer to vote. People weren't prepared for that. We had a lot of confusion at the polls. I'm not saying it was intentional suppression, but there was a lot of changes that the state elections machinery, people and machines, weren't ready for, and that's unfortunate. We would have had a higher turnout.
All right. We saw more court cases this year, and the courts impacted our state perhaps more than any other. We had the voter ID case, the school voucher case, and a lot of heat, of course, over the same-sex marriage case. Becki, what court case had the most impact in North Carolina?
I'm not sure that I would. It depends on who you are and what your interest is and how you were impacted by those things, redistricting, the Charlotte Airport, the Asheville Water, or other court cases that have come down. But in general, I think what this has done is it has re-emphasize the importance of the Constitution, that the debate at the General Assembly, as bills are being proposed, as they're being drafted, as they're put together, there's more and more discussion of, is this constitutional? And then with these lawsuits, what I think the impact is that it really questions that and brings to the attention of, of our Constitution how important it is and how important it is that we stick to that.
Is it fair to say, however, that we are entering, as a result of the last several years, entering an era, Brad, in which the courts are going to play a larger voice?
I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think they're controversial cases, but I don't think, especially with the state Supreme Court and Mark Martin being the new Chief Justice, I don't see him being overly active. I don't think it's going to be a super active judiciary.
All right. Well, don't forget to tune in next week for our special half-hour interview with Governor Pat McCrory. He's going to review the year just concluded and tell us his agenda for 2015. So be sure to catch next week's show over the air, or you can stream it on our website, ncspin.com. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about education issues and the economy. Stay with us.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Hi, I'm Linda Loveland. I want the best for my kids. Feeding them foods they like within my budget is a priority. But what do we really know about these foods? North Carolina farmers and food experts give you a website to find it all. FeedTheDialogueNC.com, a place where moms like you and me can learn more about the foods we eat and the farmers that feed us. Check it out. Add your input and help feed the dialogue. Let's talk food at FeedTheDialogueNC.com.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
Do you love the history and art of North Carolina? Then you'll want a copy of Southport's Art Newton, a stunning 160-page coffee table book filled with the beautiful watercolors of coastal Carolina artist Art Newton. Southport's Art Newton was published by Southport native and noted North Carolinian Tommy Harrelson, and is filled with brilliant paintings of the buildings, boats, and beaches of southeastern Carolina. Look for Southport's Art Newton at local bookstores across the state or purchase it online at Amazon. How will North Carolina compete in a future where everything is accelerated? Join state leaders February 9th and 10th at the Raleigh Convention Center for the 30th Annual Emerging Issues Forum. Explore how innovators are thriving and how North Carolina can keep pace. Register now at emergingissues.org.
We now return to NC Spin.
We're continuing our rundown of big issues of 2014, how they affected our state. Well, education is never far from the headlines. This year was no exception. This was the year of teacher pay raises, the scrapping of the Common Core curriculum, disappointing third grade reading test scores, and the start of school vouchers. Brad, Democrats beat Republicans over the heads during the election, saying that the Republicans had decimated public education and that they had cut the education budget by $500 million. Well, the exit polls showed after the November 4th elections that the voters believed the Democrats' charges. You're in the PR business. What could the Republicans have done to keep the Democrats from framing this issue?
Well, I'll tell you what they did. They framed it with Obama and just beat the Democrats over the head with Obama all over the state and sort of shifted the argument away from the education. But, Tom, I think the road is running real close for the Democrats on spend in education. I think they've really got to look, and some of the research that I've seen and some of the focus groups. Voters want more accountability, and they want more local decisions for their local school authorities.
Well, John, was that what this accountability business, was this what the Common Core scuttling was all about, or what was the impact of that, and why did it took place?
There's a lot of moving parts in the Common Core discussion, because you have conservatives who are concerned about Common Core because they don't trust anything that comes out of any national group or anything out of Washington, and because the Obama administration used a lot of carrots and sticks to get Common Core adopted, that made them suspicious too. And those are, by the way, legitimate suspicions. On the other hand, there are also conservatives, including members of the legislature, who do not trust the State Department of Public Instruction to come up with rigorous standards, because we've had 20 years of experience that shows they can't. So if you don't like Common Core, but you don't want to go back to having the educrats create their own grading system, you have to have an alternative. And I think what they're going to end up with is what other states have done, which is to ditch part of the Common Core standards, the whole concept itself, but not all the standards themselves, some of which are okay.
Chris, we can't talk about education and impact of 2014 without talking about the continuing UNC scandal, the Weinstein report. Where's all this ended up at the end of 2014?
Well, it's still going on, and it's a serious black eye for the University of North Carolina. We've seen people, coaches and administrators leave and move on and get fired, and maybe not enough of them. I think it also raises the huge, it brings home the big issue of college sports and college athletics and the charade that it is, and I think this is going to spread to other universities in the system and around the country.
Becki, I want to touch on the economy here, because we started the year at a 6.9% unemployment rate, ended the year, or going into December, at 6.3%. Where's the economy at year's end? What's the story here for this year?
I think it is recovering. I don't think it's a robust recovery at this point. But, you know, looking nationally, we don't have a robust economy nationally. North Carolina is doing better than the national averages with these things. We're also doing better than most of our neighbors. So what I think is, again, North Carolina's economy is recovering. We need to continue doing what we need to do. We need to let these tax cuts go into effect, let the economy begin to recover, businesses get back on their feet, begin to reinvest in creating jobs.
All right, after these messages, we're going to get our panel to discuss and name the NC Spin Person of the Year.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Does your North Carolina business or organization have a story to tell? I'm Richard Campbell, and at Carolina Broadcasting and Publishing, we help tell stories that connect you to the people who will respond. We take the time to understand our clients' needs and what makes them unique. We craft their stories through the efficient use of words, images, and videos that resonate with their desired audience. We also know that a good story is incomplete without a call to action. On video, on air, online, and in print, from concept to final production, no one can help tell your story more effectively or affordably than we can. For special introductory offers, visit carolinabroadcasting.com or call 919-832-1416. Again, that's carolinabroadcasting.com. Let us help tell your story today.
One in 5 North Carolinians can't buy healthy foods in their communities, increasing their risk of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and some forms of cancer. Learn more at accesshealthyfoodsnc.org.
Each year at this time of the year, we ask our panel, all of our panelists who've been on this show during the course of the year, to nominate a person who they think has made the most significant contribution to our state during the past year, the NC Spin Person of the Year. So, Becki, let's start with you. Who do you nominate?
I nominate Tom Tillis for a couple reasons. There's obviously the thing of he had a really tough primary. Brad can talk more about the election and those kind of things. You know, he won this Senate race he wasn't expected to win, all of those kind of things. But the reason why I'm really nominating, because I think he had a tremendous impact, is he was the key architect, one of the key architects of many of the reforms that have been put into place in the last 4 years. He also was the only sitting Speaker of the House that ran for a major office like the Senate. So what the General Assembly did was really a referendum, and with the $130 million that was spent in that race, that message went across every legislative district.
Chris, who do you nominate?
Well, I don't agree with what he did, but I think I certainly understand Tillis. I think Senator Phil Berger, Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger, remains the most powerful politician in North Carolina. I think he imposed his will on a lot of things in the General Assembly session, and it got so bad that Governor McCrory and Tillis had to team up on Berger publicly and call him out on a big fight over teacher assistants in the process. And I think he'll continue to be one of the most powerful people, even though I don't like what he's doing.
John Hood, who do you nominate?
I think those are very reasonable suggestions. I will throw out two names, Dan Kane and Mary Willingham. Dan Kane's the Raleigh News and Observer reporter who spearheaded the paper's coverage of the athletic and academic scandals at UNC Chapel Hill. Mary Willingham, of course, was one of the sources for those stories. Very important story, not just in North Carolina, but around the country.
Brad, who do you nominate?
Well, I nominate Tom Tillis. I think that he was the underdog throughout the political campaign. He changed the political landscape and was he was underfunded as far as Hagan outspent him, and he was still able to come out and win, deliver his message. He held his ground, and I think he's going to change the political landscape in the state.
All right. Other names that we had from some of our other panelists included retiring Congressman Howard Coble, who had been in office for many, many years in the 6th District of North Carolina, kind of an unassuming kind of guy, and yet somebody that was kind of the old line.
But also sort of built the Republican Party in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And wore plaid coats a lot.
Yeah.
Those two things are related.
Yeah, right.
That's a definite plus there. If he'd had a bow tie, it'd been all right. Nomination for Pat McCrory. The consensus and the name of the person of the year for NC Spin, Tom Tillis. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of this day and this year. To stay informed all during the week, and be sure to see our program next week with the interview of Governor Pat McCrory, visit our website, ncspin.com, catch NC Spin on Facebook, and we hope you'll join us when we do that interview next week. Until then, stay informed. Happy New Year, by the way. Watch out for the spin.